Halo 5 has been out for almost 2 years now, and recently it seems like there's been a bit of a breakdown from the Halo community. Every day my feeds are flooded with arguments on Twitter from pro players who have had it up to here with sprint and aiming down the sights, and the more casual story community has been engaging in heated debates that last days about which Halo game was the best. And obviously the Halo community has always had these kinds of debates whenever something controversial enters the Halo scene, such as sprint or aiming down the sights or a bad story, but this time it seems way more intense than usual, and in such a weird time where nothing really is happening Halo-wise. What caused this recent explosion of anger and differing opinions? Who honestly knows, but before we begin the video I want to remind people of the Halo cycle. The Halo cycle usually consists of the current Halo game being ripped apart while the previous game is looked back upon fondly, and once a new title is released, we play a big game of musical chairs, and there's a big reshuffling, and now the title previously hated is suddenly looked back upon fondly, and the new release is considered the worst Halo game in the series. A main culprit for this cycle, I believe, is people being anxious that the current Halo game has set the standard for the series going forward, and flaws and everything that bogs down the current game will remain as a series staple. I know that Halo 5 has been a frustrating game for many reasons and for many people. People who are honestly fans of Halo 5 feel like they aren't allowed to like Halo 5 because of big voices like me who make videos criticizing the game. And for the people who really don't like the game, they feel like this is just a sign that everything they love about Halo will be eradicated going forward. They aiming down the sights and sprint and everything that they dislike, they're going to remain in the series, and the good old days of Halo, that will never return. Obviously, I have my own 2 cents that I'd like to throw in the ring, but that would just distract from the purpose of this video. But if you're wondering what I'm trying to get at here with this little intro, it's that our feedback is more important than you may think. And recently, I believe that the community has been doing a much better job at expressing their concerns going forward. I don't see as many
343 sucks, Halo 6 should fail
comments that don't really help make the series any better. I see deep analysis and well thought out opinions despite the ridiculous amount of arguing over Twitter, Reddit, Waypoint, etc. People are debating with well-formed opinions instead of childish insults that were common during the early days of Halo 5 and definitely Halo 4's lifespan. If 343 can see the community clearly listing things that they dislike and possible solutions, then that allows 343 to properly gauge what feedback is important and constructive and what should be dismissed as just non-constructive whining. Halo has always had a history of the Covenant being the highlight of their games, and the secondary enemy, whatever it is, being a subject of criticism. I remember the complaints about the Flood during the original Halo trilogy, and while I do find myself missing those gross space zombies, I try not to forget the stigma about them back in the day. You don't need to agree with me about the Flood, you may look back upon them fondly now that years have gone by, or maybe you liked them from the very beginning. Personally, I felt that the Flood weren't too much fun to fight until Halo 3, and similar to the Flood, I think the Prometheans can really shine in their third game if handled properly. For this video, we will break down core issues in the Prometheans' designs that lead to many contradictions with Halo's core sandbox and gameplay style, if they are to be fun to fight. They need to be retooled massively. They need to be brought back to the drawing board in many ways. And right now we're gonna list some things that can maybe improve them and make them a bit more fun to fight. Similar to the Flood in Halo CE and definitely Halo 2, the Prometheans' problems seem to be hyper-saturated when they are left to exclusively hold an entire level on their shoulders. Some of classic Halo's worst levels were Flood-exclusive levels, while some of Halo 4 and 5's worst levels are the levels where the Prometheans exclusively act as the enemy, with the Breaking being arguably one of the worst levels in the entire franchise for multiple reasons. While poor level design is the cause of some of Halo 5's shortcomings with the Prometheans, I think the Prometheans in Halo 5 cause plenty of damage themselves. Many people have heard me describe Halo 5's campaign as very linear, and while I do mean that the level design is very restrictive, sometimes I don't communicate as well that I also mean the enemy engagements themselves are quite linear as well. Halo CE and Halo 3 are linear games, with a clear path from point A to point B, but due to how flexible the Covenant AI is, it created scenarios where unexpected things happened, and engagements in the sandbox were never really done the same way each time. Most engagements took place in close range because of the lack of range on most weapons that would actually create a kind of cover if you're from a distance, allowing you to experiment with different tactics. But if you were lucky enough to find a ranged weapon, that allowed you advantages that the AI then had to overcome and become flexible to in order to kill you, such as possibly retreating or locating vehicles that they could use to get in close. Halo 5's focus on aiming down the sights for every weapon, including boosting the accuracy of automatics, means that any weapon now is viable at extremely long ranges. You find that most enemy encounters in Halo 5's campaign are handled from a long range, with Prometheans able to kill you from across the map, allowing very little opportunity to get close or maybe change things up. And thanks to their homing weapons, getting close is actually a bad idea, and you're punished for trying to experiment with close-range weapons such as the shotgun. The shotgun, which would be a lot of fun with mowing down swarms of crawlers, is actually a terrible weapon now because it requires you to be right next to hundreds of strong homing weapons that will not miss. And hey, if they decide to not just shower you with homing lasers, they'll kill you in an almost instant melee attack that is impossible to predict, and when it happens it just throws you into a downed animation and you have to wait forever for your stupid teammates to run out into the open and hopefully revive you, but probably not because they're gonna get gunned down by homing fire as well, or an insta-kill melee attack. Punishing the player for experimenting in close range creates little room for variety, and means that now most of the engagements have to be from behind cover across the room and adopting a whack-a-mole style of gameplay to kill all the enemies before proceeding that makes most modern shooter campaigns so boring and tedious. This goes against Halo's prior campaigns, which actively encouraged on-the-move, never-stopping gunplay, such as the Silent Cartographer, which had you never slowing down from the second you land on that beach. Bungie designed Halo to be fun when on the move, to be at its peak when you are not stopping. And that's why the redesign of the hunters that have the level stopping dead in its tracks for these boss fights isn't very fun. It's why the Promethean engagements are so tedious, where it forces you to hide behind cover and essentially play a first-person Gears of War. Part of the reason people hate the breaking so much is because it is the level that highlights the main problem with Halo 5's engagements. This level aggressively highlights how Halo 5's Promethean engagements always play out like a really poor third-person shooter stuck in the first person, which contradicts the core gameplay of the Halo series. Halo shouldn't be stopping dead in its tracks so frequently. For people wanting to experience this for themselves, go to the breaking, set the difficulty to heroic, which is the difficulty Halo should be played at, and you'll see what I mean. You're constantly being stopped in your tracks, you're constantly forced to take cover and just sit at the back of the room slowly, one by one, headshotting all the enemies that pop out from behind cover, and then you start to get flashbacks to other campaigns that aren't Halo. Another thing that can go a long way with helping the Promethean encounters feel a bit more organic is to treat their appearance on the battlefield more organically. Instead of literally just dropping them in like a prop in Forge mode, give them their own drop ships. Why not have the dropship itself disassemble into a squad of soldiers when it reaches the battlefield? And maybe when you see the dropship coming in from a distance, you can shoot at it and knock off pieces, so when it finally arrives and it begins disassembling, there are less soldiers for you to deal with because there was less of the ship when it finally arrived. Now another thing, but it's a small thing, that I think would improve Promethean encounters and make them feel a little bit less visually tedious is toning down the twinkle sparkle particle effect that triggers whenever you kill a soldier or a knight. Could you imagine how tedious and repetitive the Grunt birthday party skull would be if it happened to every enemy and it didn't matter if you landed a headshot or not? It just happened. Or imagine with the melee attacks. Imagine if you had to do an assassination animation every single time you punch somebody. It would get pretty tedious after a while, and I feel that this effect is happening with the Prometheans twinkling and sparkling. What I would do with this type of kill is I would make it very specific. Like, you have to land a specific type of headshot, or for the knight, it only triggers when he shows his little face and you land a headshot. Otherwise, when you kill a soldier and a knight, just have them fall apart and explode in a blue electrical fire similar to the Sentinels from previous Halo games. Doing this would make it so that the effect is more of a reward for the player, in the same way that the assassination animation is a reward for managing to get behind a person unnoticed and execute a melee attack. And what'll probably also be nice is because this twinkle twinkle sparkle particle effect is happening less and less on the battlefield, it'll probably put less of a strain on the engine. Because if you notice, Halo 5 during the E3 presentation, there were a lot more particle effects than in the final game, and it's probably because there were so many on the field that they had to tone down the effect because it was stressing the engine too much. Halo 5's entire weapon roster was heavily tested and balanced for competitive play. And honestly, while it's good for the online atmosphere, I think that this caused a lot of issues on the campaign front because of an important part about good enemy design. This important part is that while enemies need to be fun to be shot at, the enemies need to be fun when they're shooting at you as well. Classic Halo campaigns had certain guns that you could pick up that were very clearly balanced for esports and multiplayer, but then there were also guns that were very clearly focused for campaign gameplay, and they weren't very good in the online atmosphere and competitive play because they didn't really need to be. Every gun doesn't need to be hyper laser focus tested for online esports. Classic Halo's enemy weapons were usually very inaccurate and had projectiles that moved slow enough so that players could easily strafe to avoid them, and this prompted movement and fed into Halo's always on the move gameplay style. Halo needs a good list of just chill guns like the old plasma rifle or the brute spiker that didn't really cause the campaigns to feel as sweaty as the multiplayer matches because you weren't being sniped with fully automatic homing weapons that were fine-tuned for esports play. Halo 5 didn't need to have every single weapon be esports viable, and I think the campaign only highlighted that issue. Part of the reason the Human and Covenant weapons have such good chemistry is because of how tightly they were balanced against each other. It's kind of like rock, paper, scissors. Each faction has their strengths and weaknesses, but similar to rock, paper, scissors, there are problems when you try to add a new element into the mix, and sadly that's what the Promethean weapons feel like. It's now, instead of rock, paper, scissors, it feels more like rock, paper, scissors, and scissors that glow orange. The Covenant weapons did a very good job of not feeling redundant and like just blue reskins of human weapons. The plasma pistol was clearly not the Magnum in design and in utility. The fuel rod gun was clearly not the rocket launcher. The plasma rifle was clearly not the assault rifle, etc. And as the series went on, it did begin to introduce a few just redundant and stupid weapons that honestly didn't need to be in the game. For the most part, it tried to stay at least balanced. There were Covenant weapons and human weapons, and none performed similarly. But sadly, Halo 4 could not boast this when it introduced Promethean weapons. The suppressor was just a not as good assault rifle, the scattershot was just a kind of better shotgun, the incineration cannon was just a more powerful rocket launcher. The bolt shot was the most creative Promethean weapon with its charge-up shotgun mechanic, but even then, the primary fire for it was just a magnum, but not as good. Halo 5 made attempts to correct this, but I feel that the ghosts of Halo 4 still haunt the Prometheans' arsenal. The scattershot is still just another version of the shotgun. The incineration cannon is still just another rocket launcher. The suppressor and bolt shot are basically now the same gun, just with different fire rates, so it's like, why did these two need to coexist in the game? Get rid of one of them. It's similar to the plasma repeater in Halo Reach. The game already had a plasma rifle, why did it need another plasma rifle but it looks a little bit different? Having weapons like the scatter shot, or the suppressor/bolt shot, or the incineration cannon that are essentially just slightly different versions of an already existing weapon, all of these serve is to water down the weapon sandbox, make it feel a little bit less unique, and really take away the shine of some of the other weapons. Part of the reason that I still consider Halo CE to have the best weapon sandbox in the series is because every weapon has such a distinct role that absolutely nothing else can fill. Nothing feels redundant. There is only one shotgun. There is only one rocket launcher. The human and Covenant sandboxes clash with each other so well, and you have the Prometheans trying to squeeze their weapons in there to create a maybe triangle, but the human and Covenant arsenal are too perfectly balanced against each other. The Promethean weapons feel like they're disconnected and they're just floating in this weird bubble outside of Halo's weapon sandbox. As for a solution to this problem, I think what they should try doing with the Promethean weapons is make them a little bit more creative. The Sentinel Beam was very weird in the original Halo campaigns, and when you picked it up, it was definitely a lot of fun to use, even if it wasn't that good, just because of how strange it was. Tap into that. Make more weird, strange weapons that no other Halo faction has access to. But also make sure that these weapons are fun when they're being fired at you, because we can't have any more suppressors that are just launching all these homing shots that you can't possibly dodge, or all of the light rifles that are hit scan and there's no way to dodge them, so you might as well just find cover and whack-a-mole your way through the level. Here's the part of the video that everyone knows I was salivating to get to. Let's talk about the art. And funny enough, we won't be talking about if they look like they belong in a Halo game. You all know that these over-designed Bionicles look about as faithful to Halo's art style as Sonic the Hedgehog, but what I'm going to be talking about here is art that complements gameplay specifically. Unless you hadn't noticed, the Covenant feature units that will sport many different colors, and in the later games vastly different armor styles as well as colors. This visually shows where they stand as a unit, and due to the ridiculously different color and visual choices, this is the art style of the game communicating to the player what they are about to engage as you make your way to the next group of enemies. In classic Halo, each weapon that you see the Covenant wielding had a very distinct silhouette that no other weapon in the arsenal filled. From a distance, you could easily make out the distinct shape of a plasma rifle that an elite miner was carrying in his blue armor, in the same way that you could easily tell that a red elite holding a two-handed weapon was most likely equipped with a carbine, which meant to be careful because this unit has more range and accuracy. The different colors, shapes, and visuals of each weapon and unit was a healthy way for the game to inform to the player in subtle ways what they're going to be doing. Halo began to lose this art that looks Halo and assists gameplay approach as the series went on, and with Halo 4 it caused a lot of headaches by having multiple guns and units that look almost identical from a distance, with the Prometheans being a prime offender. While traditional Covenant weapons sport bright, vibrant guns, with vastly different designs to help differentiate them from a distance, the Promethean weapons all sported identical colors, fired the exact same shade of orange hardlight, and when held by a Promethean unit, blended seamlessly into its over-designed body, meaning just by observing the color of the shots, you had no idea what weapon was being fired. And looking at the unit certainly didn't help because it just looks like a mess of chrome and orange. All the units look identical, and looking at the thing, you can't tell what it's holding. Crawlers apparently can hold either bolt shots or suppressors, but by looking at it, there's no way to tell what it's equipped with. And if the weapons are somehow equipped depending on the rank of the crawler, there's still barely a difference. They all have the exact same colors, and just a few tiny spikes on top of the alpha crawler are gonna get lost when you see a pack of them running around. The differences in ranks are way too subtle, thanks to the poor art design of the Prometheans and poor use of color to inform the player about the rules of each enemy engagement. The only unit I can easily identify from a distance is the Soldier Sniper, and it's because it has a giant, glowing face that is impossible to miss because of the obnoxious lens flare. Take that away, and it's just a slightly darker soldier that looks and behaves exactly like all the others. While the models themselves need to be toned down and redesigned so they can be easier to look at as well as look like something that belongs in a Halo game, I also feel that the colors need to be expanded upon. Obviously, there's a lore reason for the orange color, but if your lore is damaging gameplay, then there is a problem with your game. While you can have a good story, you can't have a good story at the expense of good gameplay. And this is definitely a problem that's been affecting the later Halo campaigns. You see the way that story is beginning to negatively impact the campaign. That's definitely something that Halo Wars 2 corrected by having a story that didn't intrude on the levels and allowed for really fun sequences. I'm hoping this appears in Halo 6, but ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is, they make the Halo games. They're not shackled to it. If the lore is currently damaging the gameplay, they are well in their power to fix the lore so that it assists the gameplay rather than hinder it. I hope that Halo 6 takes this approach as well. I don't want to see all the Prometheans' guns the exact same color of chrome with the exact same shade of orange. I want to see variety, and even with the units themselves, I want to see a bit more color to differentiate them so that when I'm staring at a huge squad of Prometheans, I can tell weapons apart from the units, as well as identify which units I should go after and which ones I should hold back because I can tell the weapons apart. The Prometheans are a mess, but I don't think the solution is throwing them away. I think that you can do a lot of creative things with the Prometheans if they are handled a bit better going forward. Hopefully in this video I was able to explain many of their issues, and I'm sure I didn't cover everything. So as you all share this video around or comment down below, I encourage you guys to discuss changes that you would make in order to make them a bit more fun. As always guys, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll see you guys on the next video.